My name is Bretigne Shaffer. I'm a writer and a filmmaker and a wife and mother. Um, I wrote this book, and I'll be telling you a little bit about that. Um, I'm just going to start by saying, I've written articles about liberty, about the state of our world today, about things that I'm concerned about, and one of the articles I wrote was about our cultural obedience and how Americans just really seem to buy into the notion that we should obey those in authority, that we should not question police abuse, that we should just whatever the law says, whatever the police say, that we're subservient to that. So I wrote an article about that, got a lot of positive responses, and one guy wrote in and was just really gung-ho, saying, boy, I really want to get on board. I want to help. I think this is a huge problem too. What can I do? And I never got back to him, not because I was too busy or anything like that, but because I kept thinking about, well, what would I tell this person? What would I say to him that would be useful? Beyond, help me out with one of my projects, or I know these guys who are doing this other great thing over here, because there are a lot of really great projects going on. Ernie mentioned Cop Block. There's Cop Block, there's the 10th Amendment Center. There are a lot of really great projects in 2011 for trying to combat the power of the state, the power that the state wields over ordinary people. But I don't think anyone, and I'm a huge supporter of a lot of them, but I don't think any one of them really gets to the heart of the matter, which I think what we need to be doing if we want to create a society, a civilization where people can live together in a civilized way without fear of, being beaten up by some random police officer, or, somebody coming and telling you what you can do with your own home, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what medicines you can use, what you can smoke, what you can drink. All these things, that we've been so conditioned to believe are a part of freedom. We're taught if you go to schools run by the government, we're taught that we live in a free country. And yet when you look at all the things that you have to get permission, you have to get permission to move, you have to get permission to travel, you have to get permission to drive. We're told over and over again, it's a privilege, it's not a right. It's not a right to be able to move around this free country of ours. All these things that we've been taught to accept, while at the same time being told that we live in a free society. If we're going to change that, if we're going to have a society where people really do make decisions about their own lives, where they really do live in peace and harmony with each other, and by peace and harmony I don't mean that there are no conflicts and everybody always gets along. What I'm talking about is a system whereby conflicts can be resolved, where really what I'm talking about is law and order. I grew up calling myself an anarchist, but the more I look around myself, the more I see that the real anarchists are the ones in power. The real anarchists are the ones who wage wars and who can kill people with no consequences, who can beat people up and lock them in jail, for smoking or for selling something. The anarchists are the ones who can ruin people's lives with no consequences at all, and chaos over the rest of the world. Those are the anarchists. What I'm in favor of is law and order. I'm in favor of a society where people are not free to abuse each other's rights, where people are not able to kill with impunity, to harm others with impunity, to steal. So I kind of don't really call myself an anarchist anymore. Getting back to this guy's question, what I would say to him now is there are so many lies that our culture is sort of founded on. There are so many just bad ideas, bad beliefs. And, one of those lies is that we need a hierarchical system. We need someone in charge in order for us to have order. We need to have some authority in order to impose peace and freedom on us. Other lies are the lies that promote war, that tell us that we need to have, sometimes we just have to have war, sometimes we just have to kill innocent people in order to keep peace. I think one of the biggest lies is that we need a monopoly state, that we need to have one agency, a monopoly that dictates to us the law, that enforces the law, that decides who gets to use violence and under what circumstances. I think that's kind of the biggest lie and one of the most destructive lies. And I think if we're really, rather than sort of talking about tactics of how to overthrow the state, because that's not really what I'm interested in. I think the state is going to collapse. I think this particular state is going to collapse of its own weight. And like Ernie, I'm also not at all interested in any kind of violence and any kind of, destruction. I think the state is going to collapse of its own weight. The real question is, what are we going to do after that? What are we going to build in its place? And by in its place, I don't mean what kind of state are we going to replace it with. I mean, what is this? What is the culture? What is the society that we're going to build? As government becomes unable to provide police, fire, as people begin to recognize that the police really are more against them than for them, as government, as it is in California today, is becoming bankrupt, and as it becomes more and more unable to provide people with the things that they think they need from government. There's going to be this tremendous vacuum, and there's going to be this tremendous opportunity for those of us who say, you know what, it's not necessary to have government to provide these things. You don't need government to build roads. You don't need government to feed the poor. Government actually is the problem. It's not the solution. It creates much more harm than it does good. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is lay the groundwork for a society that rejects the idea of a monopoly state, and that rejects the idea that you can base a society on violence, that you can base a society on, forcibly taking people's wealth from them, on, forcing servitude upon people, on dictating how they live their lives. I really think the biggest thing that we can do right now is lay the groundwork for that, and that means really just demolishing these lies, demolishing these ideas that so much of our society is just grounded in, and that's so deeply ingrained, especially with government-run schools. Just really deeply ingraining this idea that force is okay. It's okay to use violence to get what you want, and if it's institutionalized, it's more than okay, and the world would just fall apart and decay into anarchy if we didn't have these violent institutions forcing us to do things. So that's sort of a long-winded way of explaining why I wrote this book, Why Mommy Loves the State. This was actually in response to a couple of books that came out around the 2008 election. There was, the big one was Why Mommy is a Democrat. And it was this completely cheesy little, picture book like this one. I think it was squirrels. I think it was a mommy squirrel and the baby squirrels. And the mommy squirrel was explaining why she was a Democrat. And it was all about how she wanted to feed the poor little children, and she wanted to make sure everybody got an education, and that everybody's workplace was safe, and all these wonderful, wonderful things. But to me, what it left out of the picture was, well, gosh, how does mommy want to accomplish all that? Mommy wants to use the state. Mommy wants to use jackbooted thugs to come into your workplace and tell your boss how to run things, how to do things. And if your boss doesn't comply, he's going to get thrown in jail. Again, wants to come into your home. Well, here's how I tell it in the book. So it starts off with mommy as a little girl, and she gets in trouble because one of her little friends has a big princess castle. Mommy wants it. So mommy smacks her friend in the face, and she runs away with that princess castle, and she's so happy. Look at her, look how happy she is. And she gets home, and the little girl's mommy has called mommy's mommy and told her what happened. So mommy's mommy and daddy have a little talk with their little girl who's going to grow up and be mommy. And they say, look, you can't just hit somebody and take their things just because you want them. You can't just steal other people's stuff. You can't just hit people. And they have that little conversation with her. It's not okay. It's not okay to hit other people, and it's not okay to steal their things. So Mommy's like, oh, okay, I'll go take the Princess Castle back and say I'm sorry and everything. And so she does. A little while later, she's at home and she hears bad words coming out of one of the rooms in her house. And she asks her mommy, what's going on? What's Daddy yelling about? And her mommy says, well, it's okay. He's just doing his taxes. And so little mommy says, well, what's taxes? And so her mommy explains to her, well, it's when the government takes our money so it can do things with it. And little mommy's confused because her mommy and daddy just told her it's not okay to do that. It's not okay to take people's money just because you want it, just because you need it. You've got to respect their rights. You've got to not hit people and not take their stuff. So she goes in school and she's confused. She's not happy with her mommy's answer. She goes and asks her teacher why it's okay, and this is her teacher explaining that if we didn't beat people up, we wouldn't have roads. She asks her teacher, why are taxes okay? And her teacher's very condescending and says, oh, sweetie, if we didn't do that, we couldn't have roads or anything. We'd just live like cavemen. And so Mommy grows up. Mommy starts to like this idea. She's like, oh, so, maybe I can use violence to get what I want. And she starts daydreaming about all the things she can get, candy and ponies and roller skates and all this stuff. And she grows up to be a political activist. And she votes for candidates, and I'm not going to tell you how it ends because you have to get the book. But she basically becomes somebody a very typical sort of activist who calls up her local representatives and politicians and says, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and kind of doesn't recognize that they've got bigger pockets telling them what they want and don't want. And eventually she kind of gets her comeuppance. But anyway, that's why I wrote this. If you want to get it, you can get it on Amazon. I think the price is ridiculous. So go to Lulu. You can download this for free on lulu.com. So do that. I'm sorry the price is so high. It's ridiculous.